Hey guys, it's Brandon. I wanted to do a brief video on a fun game I played yesterday, and it was actually a game I played on a train versus my phone. Well, it was versus the chess.com app, which they have, and you can actually connect to the chess.com server on this app, I think. But they also have a play the computer option, and it's not a very strong computer. Um, it's not like a Houdini or an engine like that. It's just, I don't know what they use, but they have a play the computer option. So I've played a few games with it before this game yesterday, and had some success. I think I had 2 wins and a draw prior to this game. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to kill some time and play this game, and it was kind of fun and kind of instructive. So I thought I'd just do a brief recap of it. So I was white, and I played e4, and the computer responded with the king's pawn game, knight c6, so I decided to go for the Ruy Lopez. And the computer played the move knight f6, which is the Berlin defense of the Ruy Lopez, which didn't used to be very popular, but sort of came into popularity in the year 2000 when Vladimir Kramnik absolutely used it to stuff Garry Kasparov in the World Championship that he won against Kasparov. I think Kasparov didn't have a single win with the white pieces in that World Championship, and it was largely due to the fact that he just couldn't find a way to break through the Berlin Wall here, as they call this, that Kramnik employed. Anyway, I think maybe, I don't know much theory here, but I think the theory is castles. But I felt that if I castled, the computer would probably take on e4, and I could get the pawn back, but I wanted to keep the position as closed as possible. In general, I try to keep the positions as closed as possible if I'm playing some kind of computer, and try to outplay it strategically, and maybe open it up when the circumstances are better for me. So I just played d3, and the computer made this move bishop d6, which looks pretty crazy. But I've actually seen strong engines when they don't have an opening book to draw from. In these types of positions, I've seen engines like Ribka and even maybe even Houdini play this move bishop d6, just adding another defender to this pawn, which is a long-term. It's like it makes sense in the short term, but in the long term, you're blocking in your d pawn, and it's kind of difficult for this bishop to develop. So in almost all those games that I've seen the computer do this, they eventually move it back to e7 later. And of course, in the closed Spanish sort of positions, the bishop usually just goes here to begin with. So I played the move castles, which is probably inaccurate because now because the bishop is guarding the d pawn, he could have gotten my bishop via a6, b5, which he did. This is all the game. But next he could have played knight to a5, and normally this isn't possible until in this closed Spanish is until the move d6 is played, because if this knight leaves the defense of this pawn, it's just captured. So usually in the closed Spanish types of positions, black plays d6 and the bishop is here. So he could have grabbed my bishop with knight a5, but chose to castle. So I got the chance to play c3, which is a pretty common move in these Spanish type positions, giving the bishop c2 and preparing d4 to try to get a big pawn center. And so maybe I should have played c3 back here before castles in this particular position, but the computer gave me a chance to get away with it later anyway. So the computer played a5. I think the idea here is that there's no central break right now because the d-pawn is blocked in, so he's just kind of going for queenside expansion, and I tried to meet the queenside expansion with a4. The idea of this is that if black takes here, then he's just got a pretty weak a-pawn that's on an open file, and is kind of an easy target for me to play against. So instead they played bishop a6, and I could still I guess I could still take the pawn and have this target, but I just decided to get on with playing development moves, basic Spanish moves. This move you see almost all the time in Ruy Lopez moves for white, because you want some overprotection for this e-pawn for when this has to go forward. This e-pawn will be hanging. So computer played rook b8, maybe thinking about capturing on a4 and having pressure on the b file. I played knight d2, and this is another common Ruy Lopez maneuver that I played. where white tries to get this knight using the vacated f1 square, get into g3, and then maybe some kind of kingside attack later with the knight sitting on f5, which is a very dangerous square for a knight because, of course, it's attacking these sort of key positions in the key squares in the black king position. So he tried to open the game up a little bit. I just played the bishop back here to defend the pawn. And I wasn't too concerned with this because black does have the open b file, but the way my bishops are situated is such that they're controlling all these entry squares. So this bishop here, and then this one controlling these squares. So the rook doesn't really have any entry points on the b file. So I thought this was, okay for me. So now the computer decided that he can't really achieve anything further without being able to play this d5 break. So he just moved the bishop back. And this is what I'm talking about. This is now move 13 in the game. So it would have saved himself a move just putting the bishop on e7 to begin with. But this is sort of the advantages that humans have when they have all this. If you don't give the computer an opening book, the computer doesn't understand, that at some point it's going to need to break in the center, and thus I shouldn't put my bishop on d6. I should just put it on e7. It doesn't figure that out until it comes to that point later. But with human knowledge and experience, we know, okay, the bishop belongs here because at some point I'm going to have to do that. So, okay, I continued with my maneuver, and the computer put the bishop back on b7, deciding it wasn't really doing anything on this diagonal, I guess. And, okay, I completed the knight maneuver. And now, this is sort of an interesting, where the game gets very interesting. And I don't know how to really assess this position from I guess it's maybe about even, right about here, from an objective point of view. The computer decided to open the center. He played the move d5. I suppose I could have allowed him to take on e4 and just had some kind of symmetrical position. Let's say if I make a nothing move like this, maybe just have some kind of symmetrical position after here, which looks just about even. We both have these weak pawns. The pawn structure is exactly the same. I'm not sure though. Maybe d5 is okay. d5, d4, if I had just done nothing, could have been good for black as well, just gaining some space. So this is one of the moves. I'm not really sure how to treat this in a normal game, but what I did was I took the e-pawn. I was expecting queen takes, but he played knight takes d5, and then I grabbed on e5. And my idea after the move I anticipated, bishop to f6, was to play rook h5 and try to get some pressure on the f7 pawn. Now, this is the thing about the center, right? Now that the center is open, I can sort of try to jettison pawns and open my bishops up on the king. Now, I know this pawn is hanging, and I did calculate the tactics after what appeared in the game. I thought about queen g4, and maybe black should have played. I haven't really looked too hard at this with the computer, like a real computer. Maybe black should have played bishop to c5. Bishop to c8. I'm not sure, but then I'm not sure what happens after knight f5. If there's any, knight coming into h6 check, and I don't really know exactly what's going on here. I did see that what the computer played. I did calculate this line, knight e2 check, which looks like it just picks up an exchange because the rook is hanging here on a1, and which the computer went in for. But I think the computer didn't expect the move that I played now. It's a move that, I don't know, it seems sort of obvious to a human with some experience, but to a weaker computer maybe. I'm not sure if it just didn't show up. I even put this exact position into Houdini, and it was actually kind of confused for a while. It was bouncing around back and forth between like -1 for black and then even for white, and so I'm just down an exchange here, and it was like, okay, it definitely knew I had compensation, but it was just sort of confused about what to do after this move. And the move I made, which is actually the best move according to Houdini, is d4. And the idea of d4 is twofold. One is that, of course, it opens up this bishop onto h7, and now I have coordination. And the other idea, of course, is that it prevents this a1 bishop from getting back and defending the dark squares in the king position. So black has to play nearly perfect defense, really, in order to survive here, because I've got these two bishops that are pointing at the king. Of course, the queen, the rook, the knight could be ready to jump in at any time, and it's all just, I've given up an exchange for some chances at attacking the king. And this has all sort of come about because the computer decided to open the center. And when you open the center, you have to be aware that if a pawn, sometimes you could even, this move could have even been played like d4 as a pawn sacrifice just to open up the bishop. So when you open up the center, and one side has pieces, especially bishops, that are sort of pointing through the center, it can be very dangerous. So the best move here, I thought the move the computer would play is g6. This is the move I would have played. The rook is not really threatened because the pawn is pinned to the king. But I thought I could bail out with at least a draw here if I couldn't find anything better than rook takes h7, and if king takes h7, then queen g6. This was my calculation. The pawn is pinned, so there's no queen takes. And then if king g8, then I could play bishop takes, and after threatening checkmate. So the bishop pretty much has to be taken. And then this is a draw. And there's no way to get out of the perpetual check here. There's nothing to interpose along the way. Was there something after king g7? I guess the same idea here, just queen here, and then the same drawing concept. So I thought I could just bail out with a draw here if the computer played the move g6, which is what I expected. But it didn't find the most accurate defense. In fact, it played f5, just trying to occlude the bishop. But of course, this wins back the exchange plus more immediately. I played, of course, bishop takes f5, and as far as I'm concerned, the only move here is to play rook takes f5. Otherwise, it's just over. But the computer was incapable of finding that. I guess I wanted to some programming. I mean, it's not a very strong computer. Didn't want to give back the material, but of course, this is just material back with advantage, because even after rook takes f5, I don't know. I wasn't sure what I was going to play. I just knew that he would have to take the bishop if he was going to stay on the board. So maybe something like this, rook takes f5, which cuts off the king. It's very dangerous, and bishop coming in here. The problem for black here is that he's just got no defensive pieces around his king, and all of my pieces are just coming into his king and attacking. So I thought rook takes f5 was the only move. But a bishop, yeah, rook takes f5, but he didn't. He played it freaked out and played the move c6. I don't know why he played the move c6. It blocks off its own bishop, and okay, it controls the d5 square, but I'm not sure what the plan was there. So in any case, this is pretty easy at this point. I just played bishop takes h7. The king ran, and now it's just a king hunt, a fun king hunt, which is of course the fun of the game. Rook takes f5 check. The king doesn't have too many good squares to go to. It's just getting sort of out in the open. I don't know. There's probably some way to mate pretty quickly in just about all variations, but he played king e8, and now after rook takes e5, there's no other move except for to interpose the queen, because if the king comes back here, okay, this is just mating, I think. Or maybe it's not. Was there some other variation here? Queen blocks. I'm not sure. What was I going to do on here? Bishop check. King king comes back. Yeah, I guess bishop check. And if the king goes back over here, then after queen h5, there's really no way to stop this mate. So let's see, bishop check. King can come here, but that also is just mating. So I guess bishop check would have been the right thing to do. So the computer instead just decided to sacrifice the queen, which I took. And with the king out in the open, this is just a matter of time. Now I can get my last piece into the game with check. Well, not my last piece. I still have the knight, but he decided to block. And now it's just a matter of removing another. So the king sort of has just this one piece here defending it now. And there's 3 pieces that are doing nothing to get back into the game. This bishop's still nicely blocked out of the game by this pawn on d4. And bishop takes f6. Now the king has absolutely no defenders left, and I'm just bringing my pieces in. And there's really no way for him to get any of the pieces, into the game to sort of help himself out. He tried bishop c3, and now bishop e6, queen e6, check, king runs, and now I played this bishop g6 move, which threatens this, and if the king heads to the back rank, of course it's mating with the queen and the bishop. And played bishop d2, but now this is forced mating after queen e7 check. Queen f7 check would be just as good too. King h6 check. Queen h7 check. King g5. Now look at how this is a nice mating net because my pieces coordinate. Knight g5. So the knight is covering the dark squares. The bishop and the queen is covering this diagonal here. And the queen is cutting off all of these squares. So where's the king left to go? Well, you can only see one square for the king here. And now actually there's 3 mates in this position. There's bishop to f5 checkmate, queen to h5 checkmate, and the one I played because it was the most fun, f3 mate. King has no squares. And because, well, all the squares are covered. The knight's covering the dark square just like before. So this square is covered by this pawn. So that was a very fun king hunt and a fun game. And of course, I think the real turning point in the game was when after knight g3, the computer played d5, opening up the center. And when you open up the center, and especially in these positions like in the Spanish, with the bishops pointing, you have to be aware that at some point white can try to push these pawns forward and expand and open the pieces up for an attack on the king, which is what happened here. And if you give this to a Houdini or a Ribka or something, it'll find all kinds of resources for black that maybe even no human would really be able to find. But this was a weaker computer, and just didn't really know how to deal with this move d4, cutting off the bishop and exposing an attack on the h7 square. So it was just really a king hunt after this. Just bringing all the pieces in, removing the defenders around the king, getting my attacking units in, and just creating a mating net. And this is just a fun mating net. You can see that the king has nowhere to go. And it's very nice because the pieces just work in harmony here. The knight's covering the dark squares, the bishop's covering the light squares, the queen is covering the h-file, and the king is just pushed and is finally checkmated down near my own king, which is satisfying. So pretty satisfying, an interesting and a fun game. Maybe not the highest quality by black, but it was fun anyway. So I hope you guys got some enjoyment out of it, and we will see you next time.